Foreign policy conservatism arises out of the Cold War. Seeing communism as intrinsically antithetical to the ideals of American constitutionalism, as well as a threat to world peace, foreign policy conservatives maintain that the only way to prevent the spread of communism was by having a dominant military with overwhelming defense capabilities. Given the stagnant nature of communist economies in the decades following the Cold War, the Second World War, foreign policy conservatives relied on the West's economic growth and prosperity to not only spend the Soviet Union and its allies into oblivion, but to offer an attractive alternative to the subjugated masses trapped behind the Iron Curtain. When the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, it was not Mr. Gorbachev that tore it down, as President Reagan had suggested just 18 months earlier at that Brandenburg Gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. I had to find some way to do that. Yeah, it was his vice president. All right. But I beat you. Okay, that's my dueling presidents. So when the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, it was not Mr. Gorbachev that tore it down, as President Reagan had suggested just 18 months earlier at the Brandenburg Gate. Rather, it was the peoples of East and West Berlin. The day before this happened, our own intelligence agencies had no idea of the cataclysm that awaited the dictators of the people's republics of what was then called the Second World. What followed for the next decade or so was a vacation from history, which ended on September 11, 2001, with the terrorist attacks in New York City and Washington, D.C. As the world's only superpower, possessing the greatest military in the history of the world, we confidently invaded Afghanistan and then Iraq. With our superior might and technological sophistication, we were promised that victory would be swift, the terrorists would quickly share the same fate as Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, and that the draw of Western culture and its freedoms would, like it did in the waning days of the Cold War, result in millions of oppressed peoples resisting their leaders and embracing the principles of liberal democracy and American constitutionalism. Those military adventures, however well-meaning, have not quite turned out that way. Our experiences in the Second World War and the Cold War, as well as our beliefs about religion and its place in the polity, were so formative in the way in which we looked at the world, including the Islamic world, that we just couldn't imagine why our way of life did not appeal to every reasonable person on earth. Because the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq were initiated by a conservative president, and a very good man, I might add, conservatism, rightly or wrongly, has been saddled with the consequences. For this reason, conservatism finds itself today divided over the role of what role the United States should play in the world. But the fact is that given America's economic and military might, a United States that withdraws too much from world affairs sends the message to bad actors that there will be no consequences for their mischief. As we have seen over the past 8 years, a purely rhetorical presidency, one that speechifies loudly and carries a little stick, only emboldens Moscow, Tehran, and Damascus.